What's up, fellow go-givers? Jawan Buford, Broadcasting, Detroit Metro. And what I want to talk about is a problem that I think a lot of entrepreneurs deal with, right? You meet with a commercial lender, you acquire some funding for your business, right? You quote unquote get the bag. But then shortly thereafter, you're looking up 2 to 3 years later, and instead of generating revenues for the purposes of scaling your business, you're servicing a loan, right? And that's the conversation I had with a commercial lender recently. She asked me what were the biggest problems or issues that I feel like business owners encounter either before they secure funding or after they secure funding. And what I basically said is, look, oftentimes business owners don't know how to deploy the monies they receive in a way that would actually give them an ROI. And so they may buy equipment, you may even hire someone. You may utilize those monies to invest in a building or invest in marketing, but you look up and it's like, where's the money going? And while entrepreneurship can be empowerment, if you don't do it correctly, it can also feel like a trap. And what I shared with her is this. I said, the biggest issue that I come across when working with business owners is they usually don't have a sales management system or framework in place. And she asked me, what do you mean by that? And I said, well, look, I can recall a situation where I was working with a business owner a couple years ago that was in the red. Once again, had secured funding from multiple sources, but still found herself in a situation where she was literally operating in a negative month to month to month. Was getting ready to lose everything, car, house, building, the whole 9 yards, right? And what I share with her is I took this business owner into a room, and then I took the business owner's employees or staff person into another room. And I asked them one simple question. Why does your business exist beyond just simply making a profit? And shockingly, but not really, all the answers were different. No one really could articulate, whether it was in a sentence or 3 or 4 sentences, what the actual mission, what the vision of the business was. Like, what's the impact, who they serve, right? And I shared that's a problem for a couple reasons. Number one, if you and your staff aren't on the same page or you have not been able to effectively communicate that vision, number one, what you have working for you is mercenaries. They're not showing up to grow the business. They're showing up simply for a check. And the bottom line is mercenaries don't come to work early. They don't leave late. They're not going to go the extra mile. And this is huge. This is a big problem. Because especially if you're in the retail space, oftentimes it's not necessarily the products or services. That's not the reason why people are patronizing you. They're patronizing you because they feel like you're looking to go the extra mile, that you're looking to create an experience they can't benefit from or they can't derive anywhere else, right? Look, I try to support local coffee shops left and right throughout Detroit Metro. But I'll tell you, I still occasionally go to Starbucks. And the one thing I always look forward to when I go to my neighborhood Starbucks is that I'll walk in there and they know me by name. They'll say hello. And if a new person is there, they'll ask me my name, right? And they'll write my drink on the cup. And after I've sat down and got my computer set up, a couple pages into a book, I'll hear my name being called. And if I do that frequently enough, what ends up happening is they don't know the drink that I want when I walk in. Even if I'm not there frequently, for some reason, they still can recall it and they'll call me by name. And it's just those little things. Well, mercenaries aren't going to be willing to do the little things, right? They're just there to collect a check. Also, if you're in a situation where no one can really communicate what the business's mission or vision or impact statement or focus is, then you really haven't been able to define to them what's good. What does good really look like, right? If they don't know what the impact of the work they're involved in, how it's touching other people's lives. And if you can't explain what good is, if you have not articulated what good is, then you're gonna have a hard time finding people who can actually communicate your value prop. Everyone from the person who may be sweeping the floors or scrubbing the windows to your administrative assistant or to your salesperson or to the operators that are front facing that's dealing with everyone there. That's a problem. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in, sooner or later that shows up. And I said, that directly impacts a business owner's ability to create sales, to generate income, to generate revenue on a consistent basis. The other thing I share with her is that, look, and it's no fault of these business owners in the sense that most individuals have just never sat down with someone to have this conversation. The reason why I'm aware of this is because I come from the banking industry. I come from a sales background. I come from the investment advising industry. And these are the conversations we were having on a regular basis because we needed our clients to be successful. We needed our clients, right, to be generating more and more revenue so we could earn more and more revenues. And so no judgment here. If you haven't had this conversation, then it's okay, but you're listening now, right? And so the other thing I share with her is simply this, right? One of the 3 responsibilities every business owner or entrepreneur has is, number 1, to be able to communicate expectations, right? Once again, going back to what's good. People have to know what good looks like, right? You have to tell them, and it needs to be like omnipotent. It needs to be everywhere. It needs to be written down in some type of manual. It needs to be SOPs. It can be index cards. It can be signs around your office or around your building. It can be quarterly or even weekly meetings, even if it's just 10 minutes, just to talk about expectations and what's good, right? Spaced repetition is the mother of all learning. It's a false expectation to believe that people are going to retain certain things if it's not repeated over and over again, if it's not everywhere, right? If it's not always present. The other expectations is, are you giving your employees, are you giving your staff persons a track to run on, right? So they can get better over the course of time, right? So you don't have to helicopter. So you don't have to be constantly like over individuals sucking up your time, effort, and energy, right? Another thing that is required is you got to be in a position where, you motivate people. And all these things are skilled trade. And if you're not doing these things, once again, particularly if sales is the issue, this might be the reason why sales is suffering. Because you have to do this, not even just with your salespersons, but anyone who could be an advocate for your business. And I shared oftentimes business owners will acquire the monies, but they haven't plugged these holes. And so they have the monies, they're acquiring equipment, they're doing the things they're told to do. If they're acquiring grants, the grants dictate they have to spend the money in a certain type of way. But if they haven't plugged these holes, it ends up becoming a huge problem, right? And so, she asked me, she said, look, what's the framework? How do we make sure that people understand that this is important? I said, well, most business owners know it's important. You know it's important what I'm talking about right now. Because every business owner, especially in the beginning, and even those who've been established for a period of time, you're wearing all hats, right? You are. You're trying to be the CEO, CFO, CIO, CSO, CTO. There's so many acronyms, CR. I can't even keep up with it anymore. You're trying to be the phone call, text message, email person. You're trying to put out every single fire, respond to every single complaint, make your customer service calls, and make sure people are happy. It gets overwhelming. We've all been there. And we know where this ends, right? We know where this ends. Where this ends in that heart attack. This ends in your body aching. This ends in mental fatigue. You're not able to take the vacations you want to take because you're trapped in your business. You're not able to go golfing. You're not able to spend time on the shore in Florida or in Puerto Rico or Cancun. You're not able to spend that extra time with the kids or grandkids. You're not able to do the things you feel like you've been purposed to do beyond your business. That's how this ends. And the bottom line is there's going to be an exit event in your business. Either you're going to go out of business. A lot of that's going to be due to fatigue. Can't climb the stairs anymore. You just don't have the energy anymore to get up and make it happen. It's going to be death or disability. We don't like to talk about that. It's going to be perhaps someone buying your business. And if you've plugged in these holes and you have these systems in place, makes your business a lot more attractive. You can sell it for more. Or it's going to be a situation where somebody puts you out of business, right? That is what is inevitable. I don't think anyone goes into business to be forced out, right? You want to choose how the business either transfers to the next generation, or you want to choose how the business, where the business ends up and where you end up on your own terms, right? And she said, well, talk to me more. I said, here's the issue. I said, oftentimes lenders, by no fault, because the incentives aren't there, lenders aren't trained and typically don't have the bandwidth to have these type of conversations. But the bottom line is Um, if these conversations aren't had, once again, you're going to be putting a business owner at a deficit. She says, well, how do you communicate why this stuff's important? I said, well, you talk about the pain. And I just articulated the pain. These are the pains that occur when these conversations aren't had, when these systems aren't put in place, when you don't put the right butts in the right seats, right? A framework I like to use is gas. Are you cooking with gas? Because sometimes you gotta let your business cook. Sometimes you gotta let the people around you cook, right? But look, you gotta find people who get it, right? You gotta find people who get the mission. And you have to make sure they know the mission. You got to make sure that people are being held accountable, and they want to be held accountable because they're not mercenaries. They really appreciate what it is that's being done, and you got to make sure people have the skills to pay the bills. And if they don't have the skills, at least they have the temperament, they have the mindset, right? They have the attributes that you're looking for, because sometimes skills can be taught, but they still have to be willing to learn, right? And this is the conversation I had. And these are the types of problems that we solve here at JSB Strategies. And look, I hope this conversation lands well. I hope you're able to benefit from this somehow. Before you secure the bag or after you secure the bag, I'm a firm believer that this conversation needs to be had, because I've talked to too many business owners over the years that once again will secure monies, even if it's a grant. And sometimes by securing the grant, they spend the money on things that don't really move the needle, right? They're not aware even sometimes of what the KPIs are. You know, what are the levers you need to pull? If your business does begin to backslide, if you notice revenues are falling off, what levers do you pull? A lot of times people are waking up and it's guesswork. They're just trying to figure it out. When the reality of the matter is there are revenue generating activities that we all have to be aware of. And you can predict whether or not your business is going to end up either growing or end up receding just by looking at those revenue generating activities, or sometimes what you hear people refer to as KPIs. This piece is huge. And I know I went on a tangent. I was going to end there and switch gears, but that came to mind as well as part of the conversation. So you need to know these things, right? Because it doesn't matter how much money you take in. It doesn't matter how many grants you receive or how many investors line up in your business. If you can't address those things, if you don't have an awareness of these things and how to track these metrics in your business, it's going to be a problem. As always, I celebrate success in advance. Goodbye for now.